fiction is often about wonder, spaceships, future tech, alien worlds. But sometimes the genre goes somewhere darker. Sometimes it mutates into something violent, sexual, grotesque, or just plain unhinged. The films on this list didn't just earn an R rating, they weaponized it. They mixed dystopia with exploitation, body horror with satire, and cosmic ideas with grindhouse energy. These are the sci-fi movies that push taste, censorship, and audiences to the edge. No clean hero arcs, no safe studio polish, just raw, transgressive science fiction that crossed every line it could find. Ten. The Salute of the Jugger, 1989. Set in a brutal, post-apocalyptic wasteland, this film follows a roaming team of warriors who compete in a violent sport called jugging, a deadly hybrid of football and gladiator combat. Rutger Hauer plays the hardened leader guiding his team across scorched landscapes toward a championship that could elevate their status in a rigid, class-divided society. The world is stripped down to dust, steel, and survival. There's no flashy sci-fi tech, just primitive gear, economic oppression, and ritualized violence. The matches are savage, bones crack on impact, and death is part of the rules. The atmosphere is bleak and sun-bleached, almost medieval despite its futuristic setting. It's dystopian science fiction grounded in physical brutality and social commentary, earning its R rating through violence and harsh realism rather than spectacle. Nine. Amazon Women on the Moon, 1987. This chaotic anthology plays like a late-night broadcast from another dimension, structured as a series of fake TV sketches interrupted by absurd commercials and sci-fi parodies. The film skewers B-movie culture, alien invasion tropes, and Cold War paranoia. It's less about narrative and more about tone, crude humor, sexual innuendo, and satire that intentionally pushes boundaries. The R rating comes from its adult jokes, nudity gags, and sharp irreverence towards censorship and pop culture. Beneath the silliness, there's an undercurrent of commentary about media consumption and genre exploitation. The sci-fi elements are exaggerated on purpose: cardboard UFOs, ridiculous astronauts, melodramatic alien queens. It's messy, unpredictable, and proudly juvenile, crossing lines through satire rather than horror. Eight. Lifeforce, 1985. Tobe Hooper's space vampire epic begins with an alien spacecraft discovered inside Halley's Comet. Inside are preserved humanoid beings who, once brought to Earth, begin draining the literal life force from victims, leaving behind shriveled corpses. What follows is an escalating catastrophe that turns London into a chaotic wasteland. The central alien woman moves through the film with hypnotic calm, fully nude for most of her screen time, adding an erotic charge to the apocalyptic horror. The film blends hard sci-fi concepts with supernatural vampirism, resulting in something operatic and bizarre. Practical effects deliver decomposing bodies, energy transfers, and large-scale destruction. The tone swings between cosmic awe and graphic horror. It's excessive, ambitious, and completely unrestrained. Sci-fi as apocalyptic fever dream. Seven. Scanners, 1981. David Cronenberg's cult classic centers on telepaths known as scanners, individuals capable of invading minds, causing unbearable pain, and even exploding heads with psychic force. A drifter with newly discovered abilities is recruited into a corporate war between rival scanner factions. The film builds tension through psychological warfare rather than constant action, but when violence erupts, it's unforgettable. The infamous head explosion scene remains one of the most shocking moments in sci-fi horror history. Cronenberg leans into body horror, portraying the mind as something invasive and dangerous. The atmosphere is clinical and paranoid, filled with corporate conspiracy and emotional detachment. The R rating is earned through graphic violence and disturbing imagery, but what lingers is the cold, invasive dread of losing control of your own thoughts. Six. Hell Comes to Frogtown, 1988. In a radioactive wasteland where most men are sterile, a gruff drifter is captured and forced into a government mission. Rescue fertile women from mutant frog humanoids. The premise alone signals the tone. This is post-apocalyptic sci-fi filtered through exploitation cinema. The film mixes crude humor, sexual themes, and creature effects that are both ridiculous and oddly charming. The frog mutants are grotesque but theatrical, turning every confrontation into pulp spectacle. Beneath the camp lies a dystopian setup about reproduction control and societal collapse. The R rating comes from its overt sexuality, violence, and constant double entendre. It never pretends to be high art. It's raw, sleazy, and unapologetically absurd, crossing lines with a grin. Five. Cyborg, 1989. Jean-Claude Van Damme stars as a lone mercenary escorting a female cyborg who carries the cure for a devastating plague. The world is ruined, cities decaying into skeletal remains of civilization. A sadistic gang leader hunts them across wastelands, turning the journey into a relentless chase. The sci-fi elements are stripped to essentials: biotechnology, plague, fragments of lost civilization. What defines the film is its brutality. Fight scenes are savage, blades tear through flesh, and the villain's cruelty feels genuinely menacing. Flashbacks add emotional weight, giving the violence personal stakes. The atmosphere is grim and hopeless, soaked in rust and sweat. It's minimalist, almost comic book bleak, earning its R rating through relentless physical combat and dystopian despair. Four. Xtro, 1982. This British sci-fi horror begins with a man abducted by a blinding alien light, only to return years later in a grotesque, otherworldly form. The film spirals into surreal body horror involving alien impregnation, violent rebirth, and disturbing transformations. Unlike mainstream alien films, Xtro refuses clean explanations. The alien presence feels intimate and invasive, especially in the way it manipulates a young boy. Practical effects are graphic and unsettling, including one of the strangest birth sequences in sci-fi cinema. The atmosphere is dreamlike but sinister, blending suburban normalcy with cosmic intrusion. It's unpredictable and genuinely uncomfortable. The R rating is driven by shocking gore and disturbing sexual undertones. This is alien horror without studio restraint, strange, mean, and unforgettable. Three. Humanoids from the Deep, 1980. Produced during the height of creature feature exploitation, this film centers on genetically altered sea creatures that emerge from the ocean to terrorize a coastal town. The creatures are violent, predatory, and driven by reproductive instinct. The film doesn't shy away from graphic attacks and controversial sexual violence, which pushed it firmly into R-rated territory. Practical monster suits and gore effects give the film a grimy physicality. There's also an environmental subtext about corporate tampering with nature, but the film leans heavily into shock value. The atmosphere is chaotic and sleazy, especially during its infamous festival climax. It crossed lines not just in violence, but in how far it was willing to go for exploitation impact. Two, Galaxy of Terror, 1981. A rescue crew lands on a distant planet to investigate a missing ship, only to encounter a mysterious force that manifests their deepest fears. What unfolds is a descent into psychological torment and graphic horror. Each crew member faces a personalized nightmare, leading to brutal and often grotesque deaths. The production design is dark and claustrophobic, filled with organic corridors and alien textures. The film clearly draws inspiration from space horror predecessors but amplifies the exploitation elements. One particular creature attack became infamous for its disturbing intensity. The R rating is well earned through explicit violence and unsettling sexualized horror. Its cosmic fear turned inward, blending sci-fi dread with grindhouse excess. 1. Dr. Caligari, 1989. This surreal reimagining of the silent horror classic transforms the story into a neon-soaked, sexually charged sci-fi nightmare. A deranged asylum director conducts bizarre hormonal experiments on patients, blurring science with fetishistic absurdity. The sets are artificial and theatrical, painted in exaggerated colors that feel like a twisted comic strip. Performances are intentionally exaggerated, giving the film a camp yet unsettling tone. Nudity, grotesque humor, and medical body horror collide in ways that feel both satirical and confrontational. The narrative barely follows logic, embracing chaos instead. The R rating reflects its explicit sexuality and bizarre imagery. It doesn't just cross lines, it erases them, creating a feverish fusion of science fiction, eroticism, and avant-garde insanity.
Sex. Can you hold a mirror while you do that, sexy lady? I want to watch my kissy space get all squished up.
If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden corners of cinema, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and most importantly, subscribe to Cinemira for more strange, forgotten, and fascinating films. Your support keeps this adventure alive. And trust me, there's so much more to discover together.